Thank you.
I know a lot about Tourette syndrome. What I've heard is that oftentimes there's like swearing, uncontrollable swearing, and obscene kind of things, and I've heard that some people twitch from it, but I don't know a whole lot.
That is I don't know if you want to call it a mental disease or not, but it's a syndrome, not really a disease.
I've heard that it's a disease that can affect anybody. It doesn't really have to be blurting out words or anything. It can be just minor tics, and for the most part it's uncontrollable.
When someone says something but they don't mean it, and it's not their fault, it's the syndrome that is kind of like speaking for them, and it sometimes can come off in a negative way.
It's kind of interesting. I think they're. I think all kids are normal. You know what I mean? At heart, every kid deserves to be treated like a kid. The ones that I worked with that had Tourette's, the one in grade school, because there's kind of the comic image that they make of Tourette's where people call out inappropriately and stuff. And she was probably the only one that was ever kind of close to that, but I think that's just cheap comedy. Students I worked with in high school, the main thing I would notice is a tendency to get wound up, and to continue to get wound up and sometimes tough to hang on to control.
I think that people will see like some of the physical manifestations of Tourette's and say that kid is just acting up. That kid's like out of line, being rude and doing things wrong. And I've done that too myself. I've done that where a kid with Tourette's, there's parts of it that I don't understand, that I've not been able to maybe say, okay, well, that's happening because that's the Tourette's part of this kid.
The flashy bits that go along with it, ooh, Tourette's, oh, people swearing and that sort of thing. I think it's quite misunderstood in many ways. We live in a society where what's the new big thing that we're learning about? Oh, well, okay, it's autism. Now we're learning all about autism and the disorder and everything. Okay, well, it's ADHD or hyperactivity disorder. And so we learn to understand those to a large extent and accept them and accept people that have them and let those things go. I don't think we do that so much with Tourette's because it's not as understood in general in society.
I have another student who has Tourette's among maybe a couple other things as well. And he did tend to sometimes kind of mutter things under his breath and say things that weren't appropriate all the time to other students and to me as well. And so that was sort of my experience with him. It wasn't extremely disruptive, but it was at times. And he's somebody who's like gotten a lot better about it. Before I had Riley Weber as a student, I knew very little about it, and I knew what probably most people think Tourette's is. So before I was enlightened, maybe, I thought of it as a disorder where you swear a lot and you can't control your swearing and you say things without sort of even having any control over what you're saying. And that's all I really thought Tourette's was. But now I realize that's one small part of it, and that doesn't occur with everybody who has Tourette's. So it's just a big, huge misconception.
I do think it's misunderstood. Having sat by a kid with Tourette's in AP US History for a while, I mean, there wasn't really anything different than someone without Tourette's to me. There's obviously going to be different cases and different severities of it. So I'm sure that there are people with, that struggle in an environment. I'm sure it was hard for him, but I really haven't noticed much. I think there needs to be education about it, because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings. Like when I first mentioned that I sat by you to someone, they asked if you swore a lot, and I was like, no, he doesn't swear. He doesn't have any problems really. and they were kind of shocked because the only thing I think you really hear about Tourette's is that they swear, that they can't function like a normal human being, and that's not the case. And I think that it's really misunderstood and should be corrected. So if we just have people, maybe in classes, just describing what Tourette's is, the basis of how you get Tourette's, and all that kind of stuff, and the different severities and what actually happens versus what we think happens, like with the swearing. Like everyone, or a lot of people, just get their knowledge of Tourette's from Tourette's guy off YouTube, and there's obviously a lot of differences than that video. So I think we just need to educate kids and explain what Tourette's really is, rather than just have these kind of silly movies out there.